Okay, members, sitting is resumed. It is now time for questions to the Minister of Education. Questions 4 and 13 have been withdrawn, and I call Roy Beggs to ask the first question. Roy Beggs.
Question number 1.
Minister, sorry.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. With your permission, I will answer questions 1 and 6 together. The post-primary transfer tests are organised and operated by 2 private operators, the Association for Quality Education Limited and the Post-Primary Transfer Consortium. I have no role to play in their operation or timing. However, I have highlighted to the test providers the importance of ensuring they comply with health protection legislation and of communicating clearly and early to parents, pupils and schools if contingency plans are being considered should the tests not proceed or if pupils are not able to take any of the tests. If the tests are cancelled, it will be a matter for individual boards of governors to decide and to publish the alternative admissions criteria they will apply for admitting pupils to their post-primary school in September 2022. My department publishes guidance annually on the post-primary admissions process. The guidance includes recommendations on the admissions criteria post-primary schools should use and should not use, and a timetable for the process. Now that Transfer 2021 has concluded, my department will undertake a lessons learned exercise with the Education Authority and key stakeholders in advance of the issue of guidance for Transfer 2022. This will examine issues such as the process for schools submitting their admissions criteria, the use of new online admissions portal and the operation of the admissions appeals process, including, based on appeal outcomes, the robustness of schools' admissions criteria. Once this process is complete, it will inform the issue of revised guidance to schools on the process this autumn. As I've already noted, the setting and application of admissions criteria remains matters for school boards of governors.
Thank you, and I call Roy Beggs supplementary.
I thank the Minister for her answer. Whilst the test is held by outside bodies, would the Minister be willing to facilitate the testing in local primary schools so that the young people would be in their own protective bubbles and would also have the advantage of being in a familiar background?
I certainly thank the member for his question. As he'll be aware, there is no bar which would prevent primary schools from hosting the test, but this really is a matter for individual schools. In 2016, my department removed the instruction that had previously prevented this from happening. I recently met with the Back to Primary campaign along with teacher representatives just to explore this issue, but teacher representatives were opposed in principle to this as were the majority of the small number of school leaders who were also at the meeting. And while there would obviously be benefits to pupils, the proposal isn't without its difficulties. And these were certainly highlighted at the meeting, and they included logistical issues such as the security of papers and school premises being used on a Saturday morning, which are often used by community groups and other organisations. There are also workload issues for staff who in some cases may have to be available on up to 5 successive Saturdays in November and December. Certainly any move away from the current arrangements would require the consent of all primary schools and teacher representatives, and I certainly can't compel them to agree to this. So unless schools themselves agree, there is a risk of perhaps creating an inequality whereby some pupils are given the opportunity to sit the test in their school while others will not. Certainly from an individual perspective, I would welcome this move, but certainly I can't compel schools to do this.
I call Andrew Moore, supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for her response. Does the Minister accept that the absence of a common contingency criteria for post-primary admissions last year caused immense harm and distress to children? And will the Minister commit to putting in place a common contingency criteria for this year in order to avoid that distress to children, because they should be at the focus of everything we do?
And I don't disagree with the members in relation to that. And obviously, test providers themselves, as you know, have reviewed and modified the content of this year's test to take into account any disruption which has taken place over the last 18 months, and obviously the full details of that are on their website. But you'll also appreciate that the transfer tests will only compare pupils who have chosen to take tests in November and December, so they will all have experienced similar issues. The decision with regards to moving forward with tests, again, very much lies with the operators and with the schools who use this as an admissions criteria. Certainly, moving forward, there will be lessons learned from last year's experience if we have to go through the same thing again, and that will be communicated in correspondence and guidance to schools in their preparation.
I call Jim Allister.
In terms of lessons learned, would the Minister agree that from last year it would be important to resolve that there will be no rush to delaying or cancelling tests? Because as it turned out, tests probably could have been held last November. Parents want certainty, so can they have the assurance from the Minister that everything will be done that's possible to be done to ensure the tests take place this November?
And I thank the member for his answer. And as he will know, over the last number of months, I have tried to ensure that our young people remain in school for as long as is possible. And certainly the intervention now of PHA in relation to close contact will aid that to ensure that those who are in P7 will not be disrupted to the level perhaps that they were previously. Again, with regards to the tests and how they've been coordinated, it's very much up to the providers in how that is timetabled. Currently, they have set out a timetable of the 20th of November, 27th of November and the 4th of December for AQE, and PPTC have the 13th of November and a supplementary assessment on the 11th of December. And I would like to think that our P7s who have opted to take the test will be able to do so in the timetable which has been outlined by both providers.
Nicola Brogan.
Minister, as a result of the disruption caused by COVID-19, we have found alternative ways of awarding young people qualifications, including children moving from primary to post-primary. And with disruption likely to continue to individual learning as we continue through the year, can I ask if the Minister will put our children first and scrap transfer tests and find a method of post-primary transfer that allows all of our children to reach their full potential?
I thank the member for her question, and I appreciate that there are very diverse views on academic selection. Certainly my view will be that obviously academic selection will be maintained. If there is to be any change in relation to that, it will require agreement in the Executive and the Assembly. As you will be aware, a significant number of parents have chosen to enter their children in the transfer test in order to obtain a place for their child in a grammar school of their choice. And I obviously support the right of parents to make that decision, and equally that's what they choose to do.
Christopher Stalford.
Mr. Speaker, I declare an interest as a parent of a P7 child. And while I appreciate that boards of governors set the criteria for admissions to Year 8, can I ask the Minister if her department can provide more explicit guidance to boards of governors in order to provide uniformity across schools, or at least to ensure that the eldest child is not discriminated against?
And I thank the member for his question. And obviously the setting of admissions criteria is by law a matter for the school boards of governors. The department does issue advice on the transfer process, including the criteria that's recommended that schools should use. But while schools must by law have regard to this guidance, the setting of admissions criteria remains very much a matter for schools. And even if my department could compel schools to use a uniform set of admissions criteria, this would be less desirable than the current position, because essentially what it could mean is that in many instances the same children would be prioritised at all schools. So I believe that schools boards of governors are better placed to set admissions criteria that meet the needs of the individual communities in which they serve. With regards to ensuring that sort of eldest children are not unfairly treated. Within the guidance, schools are advised not to use familial criteria beyond sibling currently attending the school, and that's, for example, if they were to go beyond that to talk about a parent's attendance, because this type of criteria does have the potential to disadvantage sort of eldest or sort of newcomer applicants. The department does recommend that sibling connection is prioritised. Unfortunately, we had instances during transfer 2021 where there were separation of twins as a result of some schools' admissions criteria. So all of this again will be part of the review which we undertake and further advice which will be given to schools if we fall into the same circumstances that we did this year.
Thank you. And I call Daniel McCrossan.
Speaker, Minister, thank you for the answers to the question so far. Can you provide an assessment of the magnitude of appeals and the allocation of places for 21-22? And would you agree that it is important that a robust and efficient appeals process is put in place for parents, carers and guardians? Thank you.
And I do thank the member for his question just in relation to appeals. As he's aware, it was a very, very difficult year for parents and for young people, and we had a situation where we had 280 young people who were unplaced in June, which I found actually quite distressing. And I know that there's still a very, very small number, around 5, who are still unplaced, which is something again that we need to have addressed. The appeals, as you know, there was additional money was set in to put to appeals. It was 130,000. We had quite a number actually were upheld. We had over 120 upheld in respect of post-primary admission. I'm concerned about that, and I think it's important to ensure that schools operate an admissions process that is robust and minimises unnecessary stress to children and to families. And it's also important to ensure that all schools can plan for an academic year with certainty going forward without having to worry about increases or drops in their intake. So my department will engage in a lessons learned exercise, as I've already indicated, but we will be talking to a number of schools over the coming weeks to ensure that the reason for lost appeals has been identified and that remedial action is put in place to try to avoid that in the future. But I absolutely agree in relation to having a robust process, and I am very disappointed in the outcome of this.
And I call John Blair.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I will answer questions 2, 3 and 7 together, as they all relate to COVID-19 issues, and I would respectfully ask for an additional minute. Okay, thank you. We've all seen how disruptive it is for pupils to be prevented from accessing classroom-based learning. The Executive's decisions have aimed to balance the low risks to pupils' health with the harm to children caused by disruption to their education. A range of mitigating measures remain in place to keep pupils safe. These include regular asymptomatic testing, the offering of a vaccine to staff and now to pupils over 12, use of face coverings by post-primary pupils in schools and on transport, and encouraging ventilation of classrooms wherever possible. At the start of the term, too many pupils were asked to self-isolate and school resources were stretched in supporting contact tracing. The Minister of Health and I therefore agreed that the PHA would undertake all contact tracing with schools no longer having a significant involvement. The Chief Medical Officer endorsed this approach in his letter of last week that explained why schools are safe. He stated that the vast majority of pupil close contacts did not go on to develop COVID, and that teachers are not at an increased risk of hospitalisation or death compared to other comparable adults. The PHA has narrowed its definition of a school close contact because of the evidence that children are at a low risk of severe disease, and that all staff and some pupils will have been offered a vaccine. While in some cases the PHA may identify no close contacts in a school, I support the more targeted approach taken by their experienced contact tracing staff, following expert public health advice. This reflects the evidence referenced by the CMO and will help to ensure that pupils are not asked to self-isolate unnecessarily. On minimising the impact of COVID, among other initiatives, I recently launched the Engage 2 programme. This invests over £16 million to help to limit any long-term impact on educational standards by providing support for pupils' learning and engagement. It will also support pupils' social, emotional and mental health and well-being. While I hope they will not be necessary, should there be further unavoidable COVID disruptions, there are plans in place in areas such as examinations and post-primary transfer that build upon the work done in those areas during the last academic year.
Well, John Blair, supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful for the answer. Can I ask in addition to that answer if the Minister accepts that the new approach to pupil testing, tracing and isolation has been poorly explained and implemented, and can she give us confirmation that plans are being put in place to improve communications from the Department, the Education Authority and the PHA in this regard?
I thank the member for his question, and I know that there will be some uncertainty, I suppose, really from where we were in the first week of this, where schools were very much hands-on with regards to contact tracing, and in response to that, obviously, the department put some measures in place towards the end of that week. Things escalated over that weekend, and as a consequence of that, I engaged with the Department of Health, directly with the Minister, and also with the Chief Medical Officer in order to try to find a solution, because I was aware that many school leaders were under significant pressure, and that was on top of actually starting a brand new school year and the challenges that come with that naturally. With regards to the changeover and the intervention then of PHA just nearly 2 weeks ago now, this has led to, I suppose, an easing of the burden to a certain degree for school leaders, although that hasn't come without its difficulties either, because obviously they've had to explain to parents the very different approach that PHA now has taken with regards to close contact. And I was aware of that, and I was concerned in relation to that. And the member may now be aware that actually this afternoon, as we speak, there's the start of a number of webinars to discuss directly with teachers and with school leaders. The CMO will be present at those webinars, and I hope that that communication will be much clearer as a consequence of that.
I call Cara Hunter.
Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the Minister for her answer so far. Can I ask the Minister specifically to detail what advice she has given to school on the matter of ventilation as we approach those winter months? Thank you.
I thank the member for her question, and obviously ventilation itself is actually very topical, and it's something that we have been trying to sort of rule out with regards to education within the schools, and it's a matter not just of opening windows, but obviously there's other aspects to that as well. So I am aware that there has been an approach being adopted with regards to the wider rollout of carbon dioxide monitors in schools within other jurisdictions. My officials have worked closely with professional colleagues within the Education Authority, and the current advice which is being provided to schools has been based on this work. So while the updated advice continues to encourage schools to do what they can to improve ventilation locally by opening windows and opening doors wherever possible, if there are any concerns specifically in relation to ventilation, they should call the EA maintenance officer. They will then assess the situation and agree an action with the school aimed at undertaking work to fix issues identified wherever possible. It's considered that this approach permits an assessment of the issue on a case-by-case basis, with remedial action then being planned and implemented as necessary, and that's being taken forward then by qualified professionals. But just for the members' information, of the 1,600 calls to EA Maintenance Help Desk since the 1st of March last year, to date there were only 33 relating to ventilation requirements, and these, I understand, have been addressed. And my officials will obviously keep working very closely with professional colleagues within the EA to keep this under review. Outside of that, you will also know that schools are themselves being very creative in how they're utilising outdoor space. in a way that they haven't been able to and haven't done before, and many have used the money from the Wellbeing Fund to repurpose areas. And last week I launched an £800,000 fund for special schools, which was very much about the focus of outdoor play.
Please.
So schools themselves are actually being very creative.
Thank you. And I call Pat Sheehan.
Thank the Minister for her answers so far. On the 2nd of September, trade union representatives gave evidence to the committee and told us that they were unaware of any contingency plans to deal with serious disruption as a result of COVID in the schools. And if schools are to remain open, since then the situation has deteriorated, and if schools are to remain open, it's imperative that there are plans in place to deal with issues such as continuity of learning, exams, support for children with special educational needs, and so on. So can the Minister tell us when we can expect to see those plans? Thanks.
Okay, and I thank the member for his question. I suppose it would take a little bit of issue with the inference that school leaders haven't been supported and that there aren't any plans in place if the situation deteriorates. My priority is very much to ensure that our young people remain in school, and that's not only for educational purposes, but it's also for their mental health and their well-being. And for many, as the member knows, school is a refuge for some of those pupils. So it's imperative that we recognise that this is an issue, and certainly I would believe that disruption should be reduced somewhat for many by the role that PHA are now playing, particularly in relation to contact tracing. Experience of over the last 18 months has meant that blended learning and remote learning practices are now well established. Teachers are now skilled in this in a way that they weren't at the start of the pandemic. The member will also be aware of the announcement made by my predecessor in May with regards to public examinations and the reduced content of those. Contingency plans are being developed by CEA for awarding qualifications if required. These arrangements will be largely based on the Centre Professional Judgment process, which was deployed last year, and will obviously be refined to take account of lessons learned through that process. And obviously, as we've heard, with regards to the transfer test, again, this will be very much a matter for the providers and the member schools, and taking cognizance of public health advice at the time. While I have to be a realist, and I am, and I recognise that this is very much a fluid situation with regards to the pandemic, contingency planning is taking place. But I also want to be an optimist and hope that these won't be used, and if they are, they'll only be used as a last resort. But I just want to give confidence to the member that contingency planning is taking place.
Thank you, and I call Robin Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for her answers so far. Minister, we're all concerned about the safety of pupils, teachers, and indeed the general staff within the school. Could you, Minister, be specific about contact tracing and the impact that has had on pupil attendance since the start of this term?
I thank the member for his question. Attendance data for the week commencing the 13th of September showed 1% of the total pupil sessions being recorded as pupils self-isolating, having been identified as a close contact of a positive case. This is a significant reduction from the corresponding figure of 2.7% of sessions in week commencing the 6th of September. The more targeted approach to contact tracing that is now being used by the Public Health Agency has enabled a significant reduction in the number of school days being missed through self-isolation as a close contact. The Chief Medical Officer explained this in his open letter, that only a very small proportion of close contacts go on to test positive, and therefore it was the correct approach to move to more closely targeted close contacts. And there has been, as we know, too many children identified as close contacts already this year, and it's right that we've taken the action that we have to allow children to stay in school.
Thank you, and I call Chris Little.
Mr. Speaker, can I ask the Education Minister for her reaction to reports that PHA is failing to contact trace even the redefined most intimate close contacts, And indeed, how many pupils have tested positive for COVID between day 2 and day 8 PCR testing?
I thank the member for his question, and it does concern me if that is the case. As with other issues which have been raised with me with regards to PHA, I will raise those directly with them. And with regards to the information that he's asking regarding those who have tested positive, I'm happy to write to the member with that information.
Sorry, I call Padraig de Largy.
After consultation with fellow teachers, with families and with pupils, I'm deeply concerned that the PHA evidently doesn't have the capability to take on contact tracing. Can I ask the Minister what steps she has taken to rectify this and when she'll provide our school communities with a solution?
I thank the member for his question. I've been given assurances from Minister Swan and from the Chief Medical Officer that PHA do have the capacity to carry out the role that they have undertaken. The Chief Medical Officer will be attending the committee tomorrow, but certainly my officials keep regular contact with health with regards to this issue, and I'm more than happy to continue to press them with regards to capacity.
I'm going to call Sinead Bradley.
Speaker, and I thank the Minister for her answer so far. Minister, it has been suggested that the evidence gathered on isolation during the 2021 academic year and the beginning of this year did not capture any significant data on the Delta variant, and yet that information and evidence has been used as a basis for the new definition of close contact. Can the Minister therefore tell me what message does she send those staff and parents who have expressed concerns to me that they feel while in the school environment they are more exposed to the possibility of catching COVID-19 than the general public?
And I thank the member for her question, and obviously she is reiterating very genuine concerns which have been articulated to her and to myself with regards to those who are feeling vulnerable. Obviously the situation has slightly changed with regards to the uptake in vaccination, and I would like to think that those who have been able to avail of that will. With regards to the data, the conversations that we've had again with Department of Health and the Chief Medical Officer would suggest that schools are a safe place to be, and that PHA are obviously working with regards to the close contacts, and this is very much something which is being led by them and the expertise which they have and the data which they have. And so again, I will reiterate what has been said here to the Chief Medical Officer when I see him, and obviously that will be part of a conversation that we have tomorrow at the committee.
Okay, members, the next two members are not in their seat, and I call Stephen Dunne.
Question 9.
That moves swiftly. The Holywood Multi-Skills project is not currently within the Department's major capital investment programme of announced schemes. The only major capital project for a controlled school in the Holywood area is for Priory Integrated College, which was announced by Theresa Villiers, then Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, on the 23rd of March 2016 as part of the Fresh Start programme. In order for any project to be taken forward, it would need to be included in a future capital announcement, and I intend to make an announcement for a major works call by the end of the financial year.
Supplementary, Stephen Dunne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank the Minister for her answer. Indeed, the multi-school scheme that she has mentioned involving Holywood Primary, Nursery and Priory Integrated College has been in the system for a considerable number of years, and I certainly welcome that commitment, and all three indeed are crying out for investment. Can the Minister provide a detailed timeline for further progress, particularly in relation to Priory Integrated College? Thank you.
Okay, I thank the member for his question. And the Department of Finance has approved a business case for a new build school and associated external works at a site on the Redburn Road, Holywood. This new building will accommodate the school's approved enrolment of 600 pupils and will enhance the provision of integrated education within Holywood, East Belfast and North Down. In February 2020, the Education Authority appointed an integrated consultant team to complete the design and oversee the development of the new provision for Priory Integrated College. The project is currently at RIBA Design Stage 2, and it's currently anticipated that the construction work will commence in summer 2023, with the school moving to its new site at Redburn in the summer of 2025. However, this will be dependent on achieving the relevant statutory approvals.
That ends the period for listed questions, members, and we will now move on to 15 minutes of topical questions. Question 8 has been withdrawn, and I call Alan Chambers.
Speaker, could I ask the Minister for an update on the relocation of Central Primary School Bangor from its current site to the proposed new campus at Bloomfield Road, Bangor?
I thank the member for his question. As you'll be aware, Bangor Central Integrated Primary has been selected for a major capital investment project to improve or replace its existing accommodation. Business case was approved by my department in July 2020 and identified the preferred option of a new build site on a new site on the Blue Road in Bangor. In July 2020, the Education Authority appointed an integrated consultant team, and the early stages of design are now progressing well, with good engagement between all stakeholders. The current programme anticipates construction on site commencing in spring 2023, with completion expected by summer 2025. And as you would understand, this will be regularly reviewed as the project develops.
Alan Chambers, supplementary.
I thank the Minister for her answer. Minister, would you or your department, or indeed the governors of Bloomfield Primary School, have any concerns over any negative impact on the pupil intake of Bloomfield Primary School, given the proximity of the new proposed campus to that primary school?
I thank the member for his question, and I'm not really that familiar with the detail of the schools in that particular area, but I'm happy if the member is for to come back to him in written form.
Can I call Jim Allister?
The Minister believes in parental choice. Accordingly, could I ask her how she views the proposal by the Education Authority in Coleraine to expunge that choice in relation to post-primary non-selective education, with the proposal that the very successful Coleraine High, Dunvus High and the existing North Coast Integrated should be amalgamated into an integrated school, leaving no other post-primary non-selective school for parents to choose in the Coleraine district?
I thank the member for his question. Obviously, this was a proposal which I understand has come out of 2 years' discussion between the Board of Governors of the 3 schools. Included in that have been the EA and NICE, the Controlled Schools Support Council, and also the University of Ulster, who I understand would like to see this sort of as a flagship project as a university school. Obviously, the vision for the new school it is to have it on the Coleraine campus. Now, the member will understand that at this stage this is a pre-publication consultation, so the department doesn't essentially get involved with that until the development proposal has been published. So I would actually recommend to the member that it is really important that he expresses the views that he has, and I'm guessing that of many of his constituents, with the EEA in advance of development proposals being published.
Tim Allister, supplementary.
So the situation we have is that there already is an integrated college, and now the EEA wants to delete all other schools and have only a new integrated college. How does that fit with parental choice?
And I very much appreciate the comments that the member has made, and I would reiterate that those views are expressed explicitly to EA, and if it's of help, although I can't get involved in expressing an opinion as this is likely to come to my desk, I am happy to meet with those who have concerns in relation to this project.
Thank you. And I call Keith Archibald.
Can Corlia, and I thank the Minister for her responses so far. Minister, your party's decision to boycott the North-South Ministerial Council is a reckless and irresponsible one. This type of politics will have real consequences for important areas of policy and cooperation. And so can I ask the Minister, in light of the serious educational issues that are dealt with at the NSMC, if she will reconsider her decision to boycott it?
I thank the member for her question, and at this point no dates have been agreed for a meeting, and certainly I'll be addressing that in due course. But I would actually refer the member to Sir Geoffrey Donaldson's speech, and I would hope that the concerns which he raised during that will be addressed in advance of any decisions being made with regards to NSA attendance.
Supplementary, Keith Archibald.
And I thank the Minister for her response. At the NSMC sitting in June, it was noted that evidence gathered as part of the recent Fair Start report into educational underachievement here and the JESH programme in the South could be used as the basis to develop joint actions under the Peace Plus programme. The DUP claim that addressing educational underachievement within communities they represent is a priority. So would the Minister now accept the obvious damage that this reckless boycott of the NSMC will do to this essential area of work in tackling educational underachievement, and that her party is now jeopardising the entire €1 billion of Peace Plus funding as a result of DUP panic and desperation?
I thank the member for her question. I obviously don't share her views, and certainly the Fair Start panel, or the Fair Start recommendations, which were published as a consequence of the expert panel's recognition of the importance of early intervention in our education system, they are being taken forward within my department. There's a considerable amount of work being done with regards to that. £4 million has been set aside, and we'll be working through to spend on that. And I don't recognise the issue that the member is making at this point.
Call Peter Weir.
Mr. Speaker, in returning to education, can I ask the Minister to provide an update on the implementation of the SEN regs and the Code of Practice?
I thank the member for his question. And following an appearance at the Education Committee on the 23rd of June, officials have continued to collate and to consider the changes respond to the consultation have suggested to both the draft SEN regulations and the associated Code of Practice. Based on responses to the consultation, a number of suggested amendments and refinements have been compiled for inclusion in finalised regulations, and these will also be reflected in the associated Code of Practice. The Department is currently engaged with the Departmental Solicitor's Office with a view to agreeing a final set of regulations that can be brought forward to the Education Committee and to the Assembly for consideration in autumn this year. In preparation for the draft regulations becoming law, my department is working really closely with colleagues in the EA and the departments of both Health and Justice on the appropriate time to commence each provision. This needs careful sequencing so as to ensure that the appropriate resources and procedures are in place alongside the training of appropriate staff and boards of governors.
Peter Weir, supplementary.
Thank the Minister for her response. As we all know that children have in many ways borne a lot of the brunt of the pandemic, but particularly special educational needs children have maybe had the toughest times during the last year or two in relation to it. Can I ask the Minister what additional support is being provided to support SEN pupils, particularly in recovery plans from COVID?
I do thank the member for his question. He makes a very, very valid point in relation to children with SEN. Across departmental actions for vulnerable children and young people during the COVID-19 pandemic period was drafted in September 2020, which of course the member will be very much aware of. And this included children and young people with special educational needs in the jointly agreed definition of vulnerable. And I recognise that the pandemic continues to have significant impact on children and young people with SEN and also with their emotional health and well-being, and this has to be and remains a priority for my department. The framework which was launched in February 2021 with regards to emotional health and well-being provides for a range of support programmes. This includes funding of £5 million for a new pilot for primary school counselling service, which will be launched shortly, and with an additional £5 million of wellbeing fund being made available for distribution across schools. £850,000 was also made available to special schools during the 2021 academic year, and that was to support the delivery of the Engage programme, with special schools incorporated also into Engage 2 programme, which was launched on the 6th of September. The Department also supports the implementation of summer provisions across schools by providing funding for £4.5 million. And this has enabled an enhanced programme of summer activities right across special schools. The member will also be aware of my recent announcement then for £16 million, which again is to assist with COVID-19 to increase educational standards, and that's to give support for learning and engagement. And then specifically last week we launched another £800,000 for special schools to support outdoor space for play and learning.
Thank you. Nicole Dagna McAleer.
The Minister will be aware of the many concerns highlighted by parents and children and indeed staff about the issue of ventilation and appropriate space and capacity in schools. Could the Minister tell us that will this new COVID reality be reflected in any future plans for capital investment in the school estate?
Okay, and I thank the member for his question, and he will be aware that over the last few months I've made it a priority to get out as much as I can around a broad range of schools, and I am concerned about the disparity of provision across the school estate. I've recently met with my officials and representatives from EA to discuss minor works, maintenance, the SEP programme, and also major capital projects, and as he will be aware, has been in attendance at many finance debates in this House, that money is clearly an issue and will continue to be. And while capital is probably more readily available to the executive resource is also required in order to carry out those projects. I'm more than happy to put together a very substantial bid if the members' colleagues are willing to support it. And while I do hope to announce a further list of capital projects before the end of the mandate, it really will only be a drop in the ocean of what's required in order to bring the estate up to standard. And I believe that all our children and young people, along with the dedicated staff who nurture and educate them, deserve to be in facilities which are fit for purpose, and certainly I'll continue conversations with my officials in order to try to achieve that.
Supplementary, Dagna McAleer.
I'm going to thank the Minister for her response. Indeed, one of those schools or colleges that I have lobbied her department about frequently is the McGurk School in Carrickmore, and indeed her colleague, former Minister Weir, paid a ministerial visit there earlier this year. It's obviously in need of additional space and investment, and obviously there's a project in the pipeline there, and she may not have the detail of that specific case, but if she had, that would be great. But if not, could it be updated on that project in due course?
Okay, and I thank the member for his question. Obviously, like many members in this chamber, we'll all be able to point to schools within our constituency which are in need of an upgrade or replacement. I don't have the details in relation to the specific school which he has mentioned, although my colleague to my left might be able to whisper in my ear. But if the member is content, I will write to the member with information, and given that my same colleague has obviously visited quite recently, he may not need a ministerial visit.
And I call Claire Stogden, and the member may only get one question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Minister, since the change of policy of contact tracing moved from PHA from principals, it almost seems that we've flipped the issue insofar as principals and parents, particularly of clinically extremely vulnerable children, are quite concerned now that they're not being contacted when there's positive cases within the classroom, to the end that they're considering whether to send their child to school or not. And the issue that we have there is then that would be deemed as an unauthorised absence. How are you supporting principals and parents within the school environment so that they don't have those concerns, and if they do have genuine concerns because their kids are very ill, that they will be supported and not penalised?
And I thank the member for a question, in particular in relation to children who are extremely vulnerable. The member may recall that on the 9th of September, the Chief Medical Officer in his letter explained obviously that schools were a safe place for children and staff. He outlined that the evidence shows that the vast majority of those who are identified as close contacts did not go on to develop COVID. However, she will also know that the basis of the policy in which we have from the executive is for clinically and extremely vulnerable pupils. In most cases, they should be able to continue to attend school. It's important that we remember that a CEV child is likely to have been very vulnerable to a wide range of threats, including flu, over many years, and that schools who have been working alongside them are very much alert to that, and they work not only with the child but also with the family to put in place arrangements to manage the specific risks that are there to those children, and this was even before COVID came into existence. So the management of COVID for those pupils is very much similar to that approach, and it's about trying to minimise the risks for them. There are additional measures being put in place, such as CEV pupils over the age of 12 being eligible for a vaccine, the use of face coverings in post-primary settings, and asymptomatic testing being available for staff, post-primary pupils and also special school pupils. If a school does have particular concerns in relation to a CEV pupil or a member of staff in that instance, they should contact the EA helpline, and this can be escalated as necessary with PHA. And if the member has a particular concern and she would like it raised, I would appreciate it if she contacted my office, and I can also follow that up.
And time is up, and would members please take a ease for a moment or two as we move back to the order paper.